I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. Thanks so much for being with us today. This is Friday. It's Johnny Cash Friday for our radio listeners. So we're excited. We got some good Christmas cash music going to come your way. Thanks so much for being with us. We got a good show for you. Coming up at the bottom of this hour, we'll be talking with Conduit contributor Hannah Webb Howard about the latest scheme to try to hurt the president. Everyone's excited, excuse me, on the left because the Supreme Court has decided whether or not the Supreme Court is going to decide whether or not President Trump has to turn over his tax returns. So this will be the topic of discussion coming up here at the bottom of the hour. Then an hour from then, 7:30, we'll be talking with Congressman Bruce Westerman about what a wild week it's been about impeachment. We'll get his comments on how Nancy Pelosi is now saying she's not going to send the articles of impeachment. She's trying to leverage the Senate in some way. Mitch McConnell saying, don't really know what leverage there is when you're threatening to not send something to the Senate that we don't want you to send to the Senate. They don't want the articles of impeachment to go there because they think the whole thing is bogus in the first place. Nancy Pelosi is attempting to put herself in the White House. Let's be clear here. That's what's going on. Let's be clear here. She's trying to put herself in the White House. It dawned on me the other day, really. And that's why there's now a report that Mike Pence is going to be investigated by Adam Schiff. Did he know anything about the quid pro quo? But then again, you have the Senate, and it's like they're not going to convict. So what is their game plan here? What are they waiting for? Do they honestly think they're going to get 2/3 when there's 53 Republicans? You had to have 20 Republicans defect? It's a giant waste of time. Talk radio host Mark Levin had a theory that he said his neighbor said that they're doing this to prevent Donald Trump from getting another Supreme Court justice, meaning, well, we're not going to vote for a Supreme Court justice selected by a president who's been impeached. That'll be their new thing. Because Ruth Bader Ginsburg is very ill, and she is the next to go off of the court. Probably from natural causes. I'm not trying to celebrate that. I'm just saying that's the fact. I mean, she's a very old, frail woman, and she's on the court, and she is a giant liberal. Matter of fact, if you go read some of her early writings, if you go read some of her early writings, what she said about gender and what she said about, needing to get rid of certain, essentially, pronouns in our code, that was back in the 70s, and, now here we are. So, but I don't know if that's the case. I mean, I think, you still have the Senate that'll just confirm the Supreme Court justice, the next one, with a simple majority. So I'm not really sure what the play is here. I really don't know what the play is. It's all very interesting. It's a stalling tactic in a lot of ways. Now, there's also a liberal legal professor, by the way, who says that if the House of Representatives doesn't send the articles of impeachment to the Senate, along with House managers to the Senate to prosecute the president, then the president technically has not been impeached. A leftist law professor who testified for the Democrats actually he's saying that Trump has not been impeached yet. Townhall.com's Katie Pavlik has this headline: Oops, leftist law professor who testified for Democrats. Actually, Trump isn't impeached yet. Late last night, after 2 articles of impeachment were passed by the House, Speaker Nancy Pelosi indicated she wouldn't be sending them to the Senate for a trial anytime soon. On Thursday afternoon, House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer announced no additional votes will be taken until January 7th. But according to a leftist Harvard law professor, Noah Feldman, who testified on behalf of Democrats in front of the House Judiciary Committee earlier this month, President Trump isn't actually impeached until Pelosi sends the articles to the other side of Capitol Hill. Feldman argues this point in a new piece for Bloomberg titled, Trump isn't impeached until the House tells the Senate. So he's technically not been impeached yet. I mean, what a mess this is. What an absolute, really, it's just a mockery of our system. And don't you love how the Democrats are now constitutional experts? Don't you love how the Democrats love the Constitution now? They're standing up for the Constitution. They know that they're just respecting their oaths of office. This is not about politics. This is about the Constitution of the United States of America. She sounds drunk when she says it. This is about the Constitution of the United States of America. And this is what it's about. Okay? And I take offense. I'm a good Catholic. And I don't hate anybody. I pray for him daily. So, yeah, this is very, very interesting stuff here. Historic times that we live in. Again, I'm really not worried about it. They're going to fall into their own nets. They always fall into their own nets. But I will say this. I think it's a good place to camp out. I think Pelosi is trying to put herself in the White House. And I think the rest of the Democrat Party is trying to put her. I think they really believe if they just wait long enough that they'll level up somehow. I don't know. They'll cast some spell, and all of a sudden, Donald Trump and Mike Pence will vacate their positions in some way, and Nancy Pelosi will be president of the United States.
Because we know she couldn't win an actual election.
Oh, of course not.
Not a nationwide one.
No.
In her district, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
She's been doing it for years.
Yeah, well.
So how is she
her
gonna
district is actually, remember when the president got criticized because he called certain countries S-holes?
Well,
Go look at Nancy Pelosi's district. I mean, it's really bad what's going on over there. The telephone number 870-275-9799 if you want to contribute to the conversation. Can we show Joe Biden from last night? I'm sorry, I'm not interested in the Democrat debates that much. I mean, I watched them all on and off, but Joe Biden did say this, the last question. This is the response to the last. Go back to the beginning of the. Yeah, you got it. Here it is. Joe Biden imitates a stuttering child. Go ahead.
Vice President Biden.
I think everyone up here on the stage and those who are not on the stage who've run, we owe them because they're all pushing for the same exact thing. You're not the only one that does selfies, Senator. I've done thousands of them. And the crew that follows me can tell you, there's not one line I go through that I don't have at least a half a dozen people come up and hug me and say, can you help me? I just lost my daughter 10 days ago. Can you help me? Tell me I'm going to be okay. Can you help me? I just lost. And they go and lay out their problems. My wife and I have a call list of somewhere between 20 and 100 people that we call at least every week
that's pretty vague.
Every month to tell them I'm here. I give them my private phone number. They keep in touch with me. A little kid who says, I can't talk. What do I do? I have scores of these young women and men who I keep in contact with. And the reason I would give everyone here a gift is they want to do something like I do of making their lives better, because there's a lot of people who are hurting very, very, very badly.
Senators.
I can't talk. Today, Junior. Little Billy Madison. That's all, folks. Oh, yeah. Can you imagine if that was Trump? Yeah, I know. Can we listen to it again? I don't want to hear the whole 1 minute clip, though. Like, just go from the middle when he just starts stuttering. I mean, that's really weird.
Vice President Biden.
This guy's not right
My
in the
wife
head.
and I have a call list of
Not right in
somewhere
the head,
between
man. Something's
20 and
wrong with
100
Joe
people
Biden.
that we call at least every week or every month to tell them I'm here. I give them my private phone number. They keep in touch with me. The little kid who says I can't talk. What do I do? I have scores of these young women and men who I keep in contact with. And the reason I would give everyone here a gift is they want to do something like I do,
All right,
of
stop.
making their lives
that's
better.
Just like, that's terrible. How is this guy still in the race? They put him front and center. You got all these rigged polls. Show, like, oh, Joe Biden. Yeah, Joe Biden. No malarkey, Joe. No, this guy ran for office because he knew that William Barr was going to expose, one way or the other, all of Hunter Biden and his dealings in Ukraine. That's exactly why he ran for president. It's exactly why they're impeaching the president. I mean, if you really see this is all orchestrated. Again, in the Democrats' world, you can break any law you want to break, and if you run for president, you're above investigation. You're above prosecution for sure, because it's a banana republic. We're going after your political opponents. Well, if your political opponents are criminals, right? I mean, here's the thing. This is what the mainstream media, they don't get, and this is what the mainstream media doesn't get this. Washington, D.C. doesn't get this. Do you understand how many average Americans want to see politicians arrested and put in jail if they've done something wrong? And there are plenty of examples of politicians using their offices to enrich themselves in illegal ways. They just don't get prosecuted for it because they know something on the prosecutor or they know something on the justice. You know, this is when President Trump says it's a swamp. This is what we're seeing. We are seeing the swamp's reaction to the attempt to drain it. And they'll never forgive the president because the president used to operate in that system and benefit from it. Hollywood will never forgive him because he was given TV time and made a celebrity. They can't stand that this man's trying to stand up for the country as a whole instead of small groups of oligarchs. And I know there's some people out there that disagree with that. That's just my feeling. That is my honest belief as I watch this unfold. You are seeing the swamp's reaction to essentially a virus being injected into the system. Let me know what you think about it. 870-275-9799. Let's take a break. No, actually, no. We're not taking a break yet because I had one more clip to get to. Grabian put this together on their YouTube channel. With all that being said, and it's kind of piggybacking off of my statement. And listen, I know it's a controversial statement. I know what I just said is controversial. I know me saying that the media establishment, the D.C. establishment, the global elite, well, the global elites might, the average American has become so, the reason a lot of people voted for Donald Trump for the first time ever, that's the first time they ever voted, is because they really believe that this guy would do what he said. And there's people that over decades have become so jaded they don't trust Republicans or Democrats. They don't trust the politician, period, because they don't believe if there is corruption that there'll ever be any true consequences for a corrupt politician. We may be about to see something different. Again, we may be about to see the Panama Papers disclosure on steroids here in the United States. There are lots of people in this country, if they saw some of these politicians who have enriched themselves over the course of their entire life illegally, if it's black and white against the law, right? And you've got all these new judges that are going to be impartial and actually rule not based on what your last name is, Biden or Clinton, or what's that New Mexico governor's name? Richardson. You know, they don't ever talk about him anymore in those Epstein photos. there's a lot of people whose faith would be restored in their own government if some of these people were perp-walked, handcuffed, and brought in front of a jury of their peers. I'm just being honest. The media doesn't understand that. And that's one of the reasons President Trump, you say, well, President Trump's just as crooked as the rest of them. Are you sure? Because he's the most investigated president. They hate this guy. You don't think if they could have removed him, they would have found something to actually remove him by now instead of abuse of power and instead of what's the other thing? It was abuse of power and obstruction of Congress, which are not criminals. Like those are not criminal statute violations. There's no crime in these articles of impeachment. In the meantime, all you have is this theatrical presentation of mainstream media anchors lying to you. We can always, there's always seems like whatever they're telling you, there's going to be a hindsight is 2020 moment, and you're going to realize that they were lying to you. We have one of those right here. This is media telling Americans that the Steele dossier is a real document and you should trust it. This was back during the whole Carter Page Russia collusion, them trying to prove and validate that the president should have been under investigation this whole time because the Steele dossier, the Steele dossier where it alleged that Donald Trump paid hookers to urinate on a bed that Michelle Obama and Barack Obama stayed in. That was legitimate. That dossier was legitimate. Listen to the media montage.
Parts of the now infamous dossier on Trump have proven to be true.
I know the history of the dossier, but it hasn't been discredited. In fact, it's been the opposite. It's been corroborated. Much of the dossier has been corroborated.
This discredited dossier, which was paid for,
Your intel community has corroborated all of the details in there. The meeting.
Some of the substantive content of the dossier, we were able to corroborate in our intelligence community assessment, which from other sources, in which we have very high confidence.
We know that with the FISA application, the relevant parts of Christopher Steele's dossier were corroborated.
Say that if the application included information from the dossier, it would only be after the FBI had, in fact, corroborated information through its own investigation.
We also know that as time goes on, more and more parts of the Steele dossier get corroborated.
So when the president just refers to it as fake dossier, that is false.
I don't think that is the accurate characterization for the entirety of the dossier.
To be clear, investigators have corroborated part of the dossier.
The dossier has been corroborated by the intelligence community.
U.S. investigators have corroborated some of the allegations in that dossier. Although
we do know that parts of it have been corroborated.
It's not been corroborated, but it hasn't been disproven either.
Is there anything in the dossier that has been disproven?
No.
But not one thing has been disproven. No major thing from the dossier has been conclusively disproven.
To date, none of it has been disproven, and whole big parts of it are holding up.
The dossier holds up well. None of it has been disproven.
All of the allegations in it, I don't know that anything has been disproven.
It's a fact that none of it, not one word, has been disproven. In fact, a lot of it turned out to be right on the money.
Former high-ranking intelligence officials have told us on the record that there is nothing in the Steele dossier that they know to have been disproven.
Much of the dossier has been corroborated. Do you not accept that?
I don't agree with that, Alice.
This is our reporting, and this is what crime-fighting agencies have said. That the FBI would not have just taken a dossier to the FISA court and used that as their predicate for the surveillance. They had to corroborate it themselves. That's how they operate.
That's exactly what they did, though. That was a Grabian supercut on YouTube there. So why would you trust, literally, why would you trust anything that they say? And a lot of that was, most of that was from CNN, but why would you trust anything these people say at this point? Back in a minute.
Folks, as a taxpayer or business owner, I know the government rarely gives the people a break. Big government politicians seem to always want more money from us, taxpayers. So if you want to support the work we're doing right here at Conduit News, bringing you the truth, then why not consider giving less money to the government that never stops overspending and overtaxing us by giving a tax-deductible donation to Conduit for Commerce, the premier organization in Arkansas that never stops promoting small business and limited government. Just go to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Support Our Cause. From there, you can decide if you want to donate monthly or one time. Give the government that's using your tax dollars to grow and grow less, and give the people fighting for your values more. Conduitforcommerce.org.
The Chinese Communist Party is rewarding or coercing American businesses, movie studios, universities, think tanks, scholars, journalists, and local, state, and federal officials.
And then, Chairman, you'll look out in the audience and you'll see multiple members of the governor's cabinet. We're also here to support you. You'll see multiple members of the state legislative assembly. They're here to support you, and specifically Senator Caldwell, Senator Ingram, Representative Murdoch, Representative Hollowell. These are your senators and your representatives now. You call on them and they're going to help you, guarantee it. And Senator English, I saw you out there too. Thank you for being here as well.
As we speak, Beijing is employing a whole-of-government approach, using political, economic, and military tools as well as propaganda to advance its influence and benefit its interests in the United States.
Folks, as a taxpayer or business owner, I know the government rarely gives the people a break. Big government politicians seem to always want more money from us, taxpayers. So if you want to support the work we're doing right here at Conduit News, bringing you the truth, then why not consider giving less money to the government that never stops overspending and overtaxing us by giving a tax-deductible donation to Conduit for Commerce, the premier organization in Arkansas that never stops promoting small business and limited government. Just go to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Support Our Cause. From there, you can decide if you want to donate monthly or one time. Give the government that's using your tax dollars to grow and grow less, and give the people fighting for your values more. Conduitforcommerce.org.
As we speak, Beijing is employing a whole-of-government approach, using political, economic, and military tools as well as propaganda to advance its influence and benefit its interests in the United States.
And I have wanted to welcome back to Arkansas Chairman Chu. Please give Chairman Chu a round of applause.
China is also applying this power in more proactive ways than ever before to exert influence and interfere in the domestic policy and politics.
All right, welcome back to the program, folks. As we got Johnny Cash for our radio audience in my ear singing Silent Night with his mom and a choir. It's a great, that's actually a YouTube video you can check out as well. Hey, folks, this was just posted in the Conduit News Facebook feed, the live video. Do you know in Arkansas that you can give $50 and get $50? It's part of the Arkansas political tax credit law. A tax credit equals free money, okay? So a tax credit is a government incentive that reduces the amount of money you owe the government. In practical terms, when you make a gift to your favorite political action committee in Arkansas, which would be Commerce in Action for everybody out there listening, it is just as though the government makes the gift for you. How it works: Arkansas law provides for an individual income tax credit up to $50 per taxpayer, $100 if you file jointly. Okay? For example, if an Arkansas taxpayer filing a joint return, married couple, owes $300 to the state government and donates $100 to Commerce in Action Political Action Committee, it will reduce your tax bill to $200. The contribution to the Commerce in Action PAC must be made, though, by April 15th, 2020 to be applied to your 2019 state tax return. So just go to right now to commerceinaction.org if you want to take advantage of this and essentially support those who are supporting your values and use the money that would have been going to the government. It lowers your tax bill. You would have had to pay it anyway, but it goes to a PAC that you support, a cause that you support. Back in a minute.
Folks, as a taxpayer or business owner, I know the government rarely gives the people a break. Big government politicians seem to always want more money from us, taxpayers. So if you want to support the work we're doing right here at Conduit News, bringing you the truth, then why not consider giving less money to the government that never stops overspending and overtaxing us by giving a tax-deductible donation to Conduit for Commerce, the premier organization in Arkansas that never stops promoting small business and limited government. Just go to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Support Our Cause. From there, you can decide if you want to donate monthly or one time. Give the government that's using your tax dollars to grow and grow less, and give the people fighting for your values more. Conduitforcommerce.org.
This country.
Chairman Chu, I got to know as he is the CEO and chairman of Shandong Ruyi Technology Group out of Shandong Province.
Over the past 17 years, China's GDP has grown 9-fold. It's become the second largest economy in the world. Much of this success was driven by American investment in China. And the Chinese Communist Party has also used an arsenal of policies inconsistent with free and fair trade, including tariffs, quotas, currency manipulation, forced technology transfer, intellectual property theft, and industrial subsidies that are handed out like candy to foreign investment.
We've been to Shandong Province a number of times since I've been governor. We've called on people, and Chairman Chu gave us the opportunity to meet with him at Ruyi, at their technology group there in Shandong, and saw his incredible facility. We asked him to visit Arkansas. He did. So, Chairman Chu, we're delighted to have you here. I'm excited about signing this agreement with you, and I welcome you to Arkansas.
These policies have built Beijing's manufacturing base at the expense of its competitors, especially the United States of America.
And I wanted to recognize Chairman Li to my right, who is the founder of Sun Paper of Shandong Province in China. I also want to recognize Secretary Ma of Shandong Province.
As President Trump said just this week, in his words, we rebuilt China over the last 25 years.
Last November, as you know, I traveled to Shandong Province. I met with Chairman Li. I toured Sun Paper Company along with Mike Preston. While in China, we signed a letter of intent on behalf of the state of Arkansas with Sun Paper, indicating that Sun Paper.
All right, folks, hey, welcome back to the program. There's been a lot of talk recently. I don't know if you've noticed, everybody's anxious to get Donald Trump out of office or to hand him a loss, if you will. And one of the latest fantasies, if you will, from the Democrats and the left is that the Supreme Court has now agreed to take up whether or not Donald Trump has to release his tax returns. And I wanted to bring in Conduit contributor Hannah Webb Howard back with us. Hannah, how are you this morning?
I'm good. Thanks for having me, Paul. It's always good to be on.
Yes. So I'm looking at some headlines, just a few of them right now. We're going to throw up on the screen from CNBC. What Trump's tax returns might reveal if the Supreme Court allows access. Also, we have thehill.com. Will the Supreme Court protect the rule of law or Donald Trump? And then we have this other one, Supreme Court to rule on release of Trump tax records. So, Hannah, what are your thoughts on all this as a law student?
So here's what's really interesting about them taking this case up. Well, so first of all, we remember during the campaign, his tax returns were a huge deal. Everyone wanted him to release his tax returns. Well, if that was going to happen during the campaign, it was just going to be because he wanted to. Just in the interest of transparency, he was going to release his tax returns. Well, he did not, and so now what's happened is there are people wanting to force him to produce his tax returns in investigation. So two totally different dynamics going on than what we heard during the campaign and what we're hearing now.
Yeah.
So the case that the Supreme Court's going to hear are three different cases rolled into one, and they do that a lot. They do that whether it's one person being sued, or they do that if it's multiple people with a very similar case. They'll roll it into one and decide it for everyone. So that's what they've done, which these cases are really similar. But there's really two different types of cases that are going on. So I'm going to talk about them almost as if they're two cases, but just remember they're three. And I'm going to talk about them as the people who want his tax returns. So there's three different types of people who want his tax returns. First, a state prosecutor out of New York has sued his accountant for his tax returns.
Okay.
The Ways and Means Committee has sued his accountant also for his tax returns. And the Ways and Means, or not the Ways and Means Committee, the House Financial Services and the Intelligence Committee has sued his bank to get any of his financial statements. So here's why these people want them, which is what gets interesting and crafty. So the state prosecutor out of New York, this is the most interesting case to me because the state prosecutor, ever since Paul Manafort and Cohen has gone down, it's been a feeding frenzy for these people to get Trump for something. Because, these people didn't go down for anything that they were initially investigated for. And so it's been a frenzy to get the Trump organization, anyone in the Trump family, Trump organization, or Trump himself to go down, one misstep in their taxes, one misstep in their business dealings. And so that's exactly what the state prosecutors are doing. So he has he has issued a subpoena to Trump's accountant saying, you've got to give me Trump's tax returns because I want to take them to a grand jury to see if we can bring charges against the Trump organization. And so basically what that means is every single time you're in federal court, and sometimes when you're in state court, before somebody is ever charged with a crime, before they say, okay, you've got to go to trial over battery, or you've got to go to trial over tax fraud, they're going to take it to a jury-type pool of individuals and say, okay, here's the information we have so far. Do you think it's enough to bring charges against this guy? There's no judge present. It's just the prosecutor and this group of people. And so this prosecutor wants his tax returns put in front of a grand jury to see if there's even enough information there to bring charges against Trump. So it's not a trial. We're not even to that point yet. We're just trying to see if we're going to get to that point.
Mm-hmm.
And so what Trump is claiming here, why he says you can't get it, is this thing called executive immunity. So there's executive privilege and an executive immunity, and we have heard them a lot through the impeachment process and even before, because the executive privilege keeps those advisors, Trump and his advisors, from having to talk about the really sensitive information that they talk about day to day. So, in the impeachment processes, and any time one of his advisors is called to testify, we hear executive privilege over and over. And then there's this thing called executive immunity, which says, first, the president can't be sued for money while he's in office because of the things he does because he's president. If the president sends a troop to war and he gets killed, that family can't sue Trump for $10,000 for their loss.
Right.
But executive immunity also says a sitting president cannot be indicted for a crime. And so this came up during the Nixon era. That's when we heard executive immunity a lot. And the Clinton era when he was being sued, of course, for all the sexual harassment cases. And so those are just the points in history we've heard this that people would recognize. And so what's different about this case is, first of all, he has not been indicted yet. They're just trying to see if he's been indicted yet. And it's a state prosecutor, not a federal prosecutor. So if executive immunity covers the subpoena, it expands this idea that a sitting president cannot be indicted for crime. So that's what's going on in that first case out of state prosecutor in New York. Really, really interesting. But then when the different committees want his tax returns and his financial information, this is where it gets crafty. And so here is where you're going to make the argument Congress is really just abusing their power just because they can. And so what they're doing, so Congress, of course, they have several roles, and we see their role as in the impeachment process, and we see their role when people have to come and testify in front of them. But primarily their job is to legislate. And so the Constitution limits what they can do, even though it does not seem like that most of the time. The Constitution is supposed to limit what they're going to do, and it limits it in most part to legislating. So they really can't do anything. They can't ask for records. They can't hold hearings unless it's somehow tied to legislation. So they say, they being the committee, that they want Trump's tax returns and financial information just to see if he's done anything wrong.
Right.
And if he has, we're going to pass remedial legislation. So that's like the tie. Well, if we find something, then we'll just pass something to fix it.
Right.
That's
So there's nothing on the books that say you have to disclose your tax returns, obviously,
Absolutely
or
not.
there would have already been something there because they hate the man. So they're just trying to he's used the term presidential harassment. I mean, they're just trying to find something else. It's just kind of like, I mean, I don't know the legal concepts like you do, Hannah, but I do know, like, for example, they really, really, really wanted the grand jury testimonies from the Mueller report. Well, you can't have those, and there's a law against that, and yet that's what they want. They just want more stuff to go to the media to try to, get rid of President Donald Trump, and that's what I see this as. But my question to you is, legally, I mean, do you see, even if, you've got conservatives on the court, is there a chance that these folks are going to side with the Democrats on this from a legal standpoint?
So, really, really loaded question, Paul.
I know. I know it is.
But, so, it's one of these things that really could go both ways. And, of course, I'm not going to sit here and act like I am some Supreme Court master and know what they're thinking. So, with the committee, the congressional committee, they're using this thing called the necessary and proper clause. And it basically says, so long as Congress has a legitimate end, meaning the end goal is something that's within their congressional power, they can do anything, they can use any means necessary to achieve that end. So that gives them a phenomenal amount of power. And it's been a huge power grab for them for centuries. I mean, for as long as we've been a country, it's been a huge power grab for them. And that, the necessary and proper clause, is how they get to do a lot of what they get to do now. So it's not totally bizarre for them to think that they're going to expand, using the necessary and proper clause, expand this kind of idea. It's a weird fit, but the law is always a weird fit for that to happen. So that's because I read up on the when you submit your case to the Supreme Court, you ask them to grant Centauri. And so I read their petition for Centauri, and that is what the Trump administration.
So tell us what that is. I don't know what that is. Centauri? It sounds like some sort of Greek mythology character.
So this is really fun to talk about, because these are all these things that I didn't understand before law school, and now I'm just like, wow, I can't believe I spent my whole life not knowing these things. So it's really interesting. Every case that you start at the very bottom, you appeal your case, well, and then you appeal to the Supreme Court. Well, the Supreme Court does not have to hear your case. You don't have a right for the Supreme Court to hear your case. You have a right to appeal your case to that first appellate court, but you don't have a right to appeal it to the Supreme Court. And not every case that gets appealed to the Supreme Court gets heard. There's only certain kinds of cases that are heard. And so this type of case involving a president, it's absolutely more than likely going to go to the Supreme Court, just because the importance and the weight and the precedent that it sets. So this is a little bit of a different situation. But just us regular folks out here, let's say, Paul, me and you sued somebody, and we appeal to the appellate court and we lose, and so we want to go to the Supreme Court. Well, we don't automatically get to go. What the Supreme Court does is they kind of look out over the country, and they find these issues that have been common all throughout the country, and they see if the courts are agreeing on it. So, let's say I sue you over some radio issue.
Right.
And there's all these cases going on in New York and California and Florida, all about the same radio issue. Well, if all those courts are agreeing, they're going to be like, okay, they're doing a good job. We'll just let them agree. But let's say Arkansas decides it one way, and then New York decides it a different way, and then Florida decides it a different way. Well, then that's what they're going to call a circuit split, and the courts aren't agreeing. And so a case like that is what the Supreme Court kind of looks for, to say, okay, y'all are coming up with different outcomes. We're going to hear it and decide this once for all. And so when you want the court to hear your case, you petition for centori, which basically just says, okay, Supreme Court, here is the case that I want you to take up, and here's the question that I want you to answer. And then they will either grant centori or deny it, which just means, okay, we'll hear your case, or sorry.
Yeah. Well.
And so it's a huge briefing process. So, everything, believe it or not, and this is also something I did not realize before I came to law school, and I learned it the very hard way. Lawyers write a lot. Every single step of the process is just writing and papers. And so a petition for centori is no different. And so it's this huge legal document. Basically, you're arguing your position before you even know if the case is going to be heard.
Yeah.
It's really interesting, and that's what I read yesterday. And the Trump issue was, well, they're going to use the necessary and proper clause, or that's what they're using to try and get my tax returns. And they're saying, this is completely the Trump administration is arguing this is just beyond their power. This is beyond even that.
So you would agree, though, that however it goes down, the Supreme Court rules for Trump, the Supreme Court rules for the state of New York or the Democrats in the Congress, is it an increase in power both ways? Is it an increase in power in the executive if he wins, and an increase in power in the legislative in the states if they win?
So I don't know that it's necessarily an increase in power for the executive. I think it's just going to stay the same.
I got you.
The issue with the executive immunity, it would expand that a little bit, but it wouldn't necessarily extend his power. It would just extend the fact that, okay, you can't be tried in state courts just like you can't be tried in federal courts. So it doesn't change it too much.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't really expand his power.
Well, and I don't even know when we've ever been in that situation. I mean, when maybe there is a situation where a state court has tried to sue a sitting president, but you would assume federal authority has grown so much that that's just not a thing that's going to be allowed to happen.
Right. So it's just always kind of been a general understanding, you can't charge a president with a crime. And so I honestly, and I may be very wrong about this, but I got the impression that this is the first time it's ever happened in the state court.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's going to be an interesting grab of power from the other side of the equation from Trump.
Yeah.
So it's going to be it's a really interesting case to follow and see what happens from it.
Well, and it's got 2020 electoral political implications because we're probably going to find out something, sometime next year, and
yes,
we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. Really,
they go to oral arguments March 2020, which means that we should probably have a decision that summer.
All right. Hannah Webb Howard, Conduit contributor. We always appreciate your analysis. Thanks so much for spending time with us this morning. Have a Merry Christmas.
Okay. Thank you, Paul. You too.
All righty, folks, back in a minute. Folks, as a taxpayer or business owner, I know the government rarely gives the people a break. Big government politicians seem to always want more money from us, taxpayers. So if you want to support the work we're doing right here at Conduit News, bringing you the truth, then why not consider giving less money to the government that never stops overspending and overtaxing us by giving a tax-deductible donation to Conduit for Commerce, the premier organization in Arkansas that never stops promoting small business and limited government. Just go to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Support Our Cause. From there, you can decide if you want to donate monthly or one time. Give the government that's using your tax dollars to grow and grow less, and give the people fighting for your values more. Conduitforcommerce.org.
Paper wanted to put a major bioproducts mill in South Arkansas,
The Communist Party has set its sights on controlling 90% of the world's most advanced industries, including robotics, biotechnology and artificial intelligence. To win the commanding heights of the 21st century economy, Beijing has directed its bureaucrats and businesses to obtain American intellectual property, the foundation of our economic leadership, by any means necessary.
Chairman Lee and I met yesterday. Chairman Lee indicated to me that Sun Paper has selected Arkadelphia in Clark County as the location of a $1 billion bioproducts mill.
Beijing now requires many American businesses to hand over their trade secrets as the cost of doing business in China. It also coordinates and sponsors the acquisition of American firms to gain ownership of their creations. Worst of all, Chinese security agencies have masterminded the wholesale theft of American technology, including cutting-edge military blueprints. And using that stolen technology, the Chinese Communist Party is turning plowshares into swords on a massive scale.
Well, thank you all for joining us via Skype from Beijing this morning. Here in Beijing, it is 10 p.m. in the evening. I've had a very successful trip to China.
China now spends as much on its military as the rest of Asia combined. And Beijing has prioritized capabilities to erode America's military advantages on land, at sea, in the air, and in space.
I've spoken at Tsinghua University here in Beijing, which was a treat for me to speak with young Chinese students about Arkansas, and also to talk about the relationship between China and the United States.
China wants nothing less than to push the United States of America from the Western Pacific and attempt to prevent us from coming to the aid of our allies. But they will fail. Beijing is also using its power like never before. Chinese ships routinely patrol around the Senkaku Islands, which are administered by Japan. And while China's leader stood in the Rose Garden at the White House in 2015 and said that his country had, and I quote, no intention to militarize the South China Sea. Today, Beijing has deployed advanced anti-ship and anti-air missiles atop an archipelago of military bases.
All right, now for real this
on
time.
artificial islands.
I heard music in my ear. And
China's
I
aggression was on
break. Apparently, we were going to break, and it just all just kind of I don't know, mushed together there in my brain. All right, so there is this new piece out over at Conduit for Action.org. You know, one thing I'll tell you about Christmas is many people. First of all, I judge people based on the Christmas Carol movie they watch. I was talking to somebody at my church the other day, and they said, well, if you don't watch it, I'm just saying, they said, oh, you know, me and my family, we're going to watch the Christmas Carol tonight, or A Christmas Carol tonight. And I said, oh, which one do you watch? And this person looked at me and was like, we watch the George C. Scott one. I was like, that's the one that we watch, because it's the best. Believe it or not, it was made in 1984, and it was actually a made-for-TV movie. It wasn't even an actual. The Mickey Mouse version. I will say I could probably, like, which one did Patrick Stewart do? Patrick Stewart used to, I think at least once a year, go to Carnegie Hall, and he would just read from memory the entire Charles Dickens novel. Pretty fascinating. Anyway, Taxing Your Christmas. I don't know if it was Carnegie. It was somewhere. So every year, I think the context behind this piece, by the way, has got to be looked at. You know, it is universally accepted that Ebenezer Scrooge was a greedy man, right? He was personally greedy. He didn't want to give up his money. Didn't want to help anybody. He was just a dark heart. You know what I'm saying? When the government takes your money, though, they are never considered greedy, are they? It's always you that are the greedy one. The government is never the one considered like overtaxing most people. Well, that's not a thing because it's going to these noble causes. Just something to think about. Every year, many Arkansans go into debt because of Christmas spending. There can be lots of expenses that come with celebrating the holiday. Gifts for others, decorations to brighten your home, lots of food and desserts for family gatherings and travel expenses. Some scrimp and save and go without during the year, yet still end up in debt at the end of the year. It would be better not to go into debt, but we get it. It's celebration. Have you ever thought about how the tax man horns in on your Christmas? Everything you buy is taxed at a high rate. Worse, every time you put Christmas on a credit card to pay off over time, part of what you are financing is state and local taxes. Next year, you are still paying the credit card company, and it seems like the balance hardly goes down. Think about the interest you're paying just on Arkansas taxes. We need less tax in our Christmas. We need the government to quit acting all year like it is Christmas for them as they spend our money. Arkansas has one of the highest sales taxes in the nation. Some states don't even have a state sales tax. Yet our high tax wasn't enough for tax and spend politicians. So this year they imposed an internet sales tax. So when you buy a present you can't find locally and have to buy it online from an out-of-state seller, Arkansas makes sure you pay an internet sales tax. Traveling for Christmas, Arkansas's gasoline and diesel taxes were high for this region. But that wasn't enough for politicians, so this year they increased and taxed even more. The income you spend on Christmas. The nice salary you work hard to earn doesn't go as far as you hoped because there is a list of state and federal taxes that get taken out before you get a dime. Just think, people in Tennessee and Texas aren't paying a state income tax on their salaries. Taking more and more and more. To help you get into debt before you even start spending money on Christmas, this year, Arkansas also increased taxes on cell phones, water bills, and tobacco products. And in 2017, Arkansas decided to enhance your Christmas by raising the tax on candy, soft drinks, digital downloads, such as the Christmas movie you rent to watch with friends. And if you are unlucky enough to be unemployed, they made your unemployment compensation subject to Arkansas's income tax. Talking tax cuts, some politicians are bragging on an income tax cut for high-income earners and a $25 homestead property tax credit, while purposely not mentioning the taxes they have raised every time they get a chance. And they won't mention they raided the fund from which future homestead property tax relief is funded. ACE's Christmas list for 2020. Governor Hutchinson likes to spend your money so much, he's made passing a permanent 0.5% sales tax next November his top 2020 priority. If you pass it, it will keep you from getting promised tax relief that you were promised back in 2013. Actually, it'll be 2023 is when we'll get that tax relief. We voted in 2012. And, you know, may all your Christmases be taxed. The high tax burden in Arkansas is a lot like working for Ebenezer Scrooge. No matter how much Arkansas politicians take away from us, Arkansas or Arkansans are resolved to be more like Bob Cratchit and have a celebration with what we have. Fortunately for Bob Cratchit, Scrooge changed his ways. The story says of Scrooge, he became as good a friend, as good a master, and as good a man as the good old city knew, or any other good old city, town, or borough in the good old world. The Christmas spirits who reformed Scrooge's heart would have a much more difficult job changing our tax and spend politicians. Oh, check it out. It's a really good perspective, one that you're not going to get anywhere else. Conduit4action.org. Check it out. Folks, we got one more hour coming your way next. I want to talk about Monsanto. I want to talk about the Arkansas State Plant Board. They're back in the news. We'll tell you about that. Also, Congressman Bruce Westerman coming up at 7:33. Back in a minute.
Folks, as a taxpayer or business owner, I know the government rarely gives the people a break. Big government politicians seem to always want more money from us, taxpayers. So if you want to support the work we're doing right here at Conduit News, bringing you the truth, then why not consider giving less money to the government that never stops overspending and overtaxing us by giving a tax-deductible donation to Conduit for Commerce, the premier organization in Arkansas that never stops promoting small business and limited government. Just go to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Support Our Cause. From there, you can decide if you want to donate monthly or one time. Give the government that's using your tax dollars to grow and grow less, and give the people fighting for your values more. Conduitforcommerce.org.
Display this week, when a Chinese naval vessel came within 45 yards of the USS Decatur as it conducted freedom of navigation operations in the South China Sea, forcing our ship to quickly maneuver to avoid collision. Despite such reckless harassment, the United States Navy will continue to fly, sail, and operate wherever international law allows and our national interests demand. We will not be intimidated, and we will not stand down.
And we'll be calling on multiple prospects in China, as well as continuing our relationship with Sun Paper in Shandong Province.
In recent years, China has taken a sharp U-turn toward control and oppression of its own people. Today, China has built an unparalleled surveillance state, and it's growing more expansive and intrusive, often with the help of U.S. technology. And when it comes to religious freedom, a new wave of persecution is crashing down on Chinese Christians, Buddhists, and Muslims. Last month, Beijing shut down one of China's largest underground churches. Across the country, authorities are tearing down crosses, burning Bibles, and imprisoning believers. And Beijing has now reached a deal with the Vatican that gives the avowedly atheist Communist Party a direct role in appointing Catholic bishops. For China's Christians, these are desperate times.
So, do you like him as a candidate?
I think he's brought a lot to the table. It's not my message. You know, I worry about the party in terms of expanding our base and what the message does to our recruitment of Hispanics, outreach to minorities. And so you've got to worry about the fall election and whether this is a message that's going to carry in Michigan, Ohio, and Florida, and those states that we need to carry.
The American people deserve to know. In response to the strong stand that President Trump has taken, Beijing is pursuing a comprehensive and coordinated campaign to undermine support for the president, our agenda, and our nation's most cherished ideals.
I think you've got to listen to what he says and how he conducts himself. And I don't know that he would be that different from what he is now in negotiating with Vladimir Putin. So,
you think that's a good thing or a bad thing?
No, I don't think it's a good thing. You know, we need people who, in the presidency, that understand how the world works, understands that there's a time for bluster and there's a time for reason.
The Chinese Communist Party is rewarding or coercing American businesses, movie studios, universities, think tanks, scholars, journalists, and local, state, and federal officials.
And then, Chairman, you'll look out in the audience and you'll see multiple members of the governor's cabinet. We're also here to support you. You'll see multiple members of the state legislative assembly. They're here to support you, and specifically Senator Caldwell, Senator Ingram, Representative Murdoch, Representative Hollowell. These are your senators and your representatives now. You call on them and they're going to help you, guarantee it. And Senator English, I saw you out there too. Thank you for being here as well.
As we speak, Beijing is employing a whole-of-government approach, using political, economic, and military tools as well as propaganda to advance its influence and benefit its interests in the United States.
Folks, as a taxpayer or business owner, I know the government rarely gives the people a break. Big...
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
You know, sometimes if you're getting the right criticism, then you're doing a good thing. I can definitely tell you that if Max Brantley is trashing Leslie Rutledge, the Attorney General, because of her signing on against this individual mandate Obamacare lawsuit, then she's doing something good. We found out. I even mentioned this yesterday. We were talking with Pete Ferrara yesterday about the insurance company cronies. What can we do? Stop these surprise medical bills and that sort of thing. But we were also talking about in the light that the Fifth Circuit said that Obamacare, the individual mandate, is unconstitutional. Okay. Max Brantley posts a statement from the Arkansas Community Organization's president, Donna Massey. Quote, a divided court today sent Texas versus the United States back to district court for further investigation. This is a delaying tactic that could cost millions of Americans affordable and comprehensive health coverage. Pain point politics here, folks. Over 135 million Americans with pre-existing conditions are still at risk for losing protections under the ACA. Millions could see insurance premiums rise significantly. In Arkansas, almost 300,000 people could lose their coverage, and 1.181 million Arkansans with pre-existing conditions could see their premiums rise. The Republicans were unable to repeal ACA in 2017 because they did not have the votes in Congress. Well, they repealed the mandate. They will stop nothing to take away our health care. We call on Governor Asa Hutchinson and Attorney General Leslie Rutledge to withdraw the state as a plaintiff in the Texas versus United States. The health of hundreds of thousands of Arkansans is at risk. Whatever. I mean, does this woman? I don't know who this woman is, but does she want to live in a dystopia like The Island with Ewan McGregor? The fundamental concept is very basic. If the government can mandate that you have health insurance because you exist as a person, then they can tell you to have bacon or not have bacon. They can make you have broccoli. Then you're not a free person. You're born into this world. Congratulations. Your life is worth whatever the insurance company says it is. You have to have insurance. That's preposterous. It goes to the very core of who we are as human beings. It goes to the very core of the Declaration of Independence. Forcing somebody to carry an insurance policy because they're born, something they have no control over. You can be forced to carry a car insurance policy because no one's forcing you to drive a car. That is a privilege. But life is a gift from God. It is not a dispensation of government. You cannot force somebody to pay the government money just because they are alive. That is immoral. And it flies in the face of America and the humility we founded our country in. The humility by just recognizing that God is God and we are not. And He is the one. He is the creator of this world. And He is the creator of us. And He has a true perspective. And our perspective is not always true. Oftentimes, it is wrong. So to say that the state, the government, is not the final authority, but founding a country saying that God is the final authority, He is the king. That sets our nation apart from so many other nations. And to then, 200-something years later, say, you know, if you're born, you owe the government money automatically. You might as well call it a life tax. Taxing somebody for the rest of their life because they exist? No, thank you. No, thank you. That's the way I see it. Now, maybe you guys see it differently, but I refuse to believe that I am born into this world legally enslaved to take care of my neighbor's health care costs. That's actually a different way to look at it. That we're born into this world enslaved to one another? No. Sorry. Not happening. I'm glad that the Attorney General signed on to this lawsuit challenging the individual mandate. Individual mandate sets a precedent, if left unchallenged, that they can make you do anything. That the government can pass a law and make you do anything. So, that's the first point today. Second point of this second hour would be this piece about a judge in Arkansas ruling against a law, a long-standing law. This is a long-standing law that sets up the parameters of how the Arkansas Plant Board, the Arkansas State Plant Board, is selected. So, Stephen Steed reports that the judge in this case, Piazza, says that the law is illegal. This is, how old is the plant board? 100-plus years old? Now, let's be clear. Arkansas State Plant Board they're regulators. They pass regulations. I'm sure they've done things before that I don't agree with. Now, then again, I'm not a farmer. I know there are many farmers out there that have problems with the Arkansas State Plant Board. I know that there are farmers out there that it's a mixed bag, you know. Some things are good, some things are bad. It is with any kind of regulatory body. But the portion of the law that's been struck down is the one that allows various agricultural groups to name representatives to the State Plant Board. They're saying that's unconstitutional. Judge Chris Piazza ruled. There's a 90-minute hearing on a lawsuit. This lawsuit was filed in October 2017 against the Plant Board by Monsanto. Why did Monsanto sue the Arkansas State Plant Board? Because the Arkansas State Plant Board is one of the last holdover plant boards that have really not been subject to politics as much. I know that might be disputed, but that's just when I look at the other plant boards in the South and I see how they're run versus ours, it is unique that you have people who are actually in the industry, that are living under the regulations that are partly imposed by government appointments by politicians. People in the industry can actually put people on the board as well that have authority. That is unique. And it stops giant conglomerates like Bayer and Monsanto from doing exactly what they're trying to do. If Arkansas State Plant Board was like some of these other states, from what I can tell, there would have been no discussion on dicamba because dicamba's backed by a giant global corporation that has all this money to gain, and it wouldn't even be questioned because they're the giant corporation, and we're not going to allow other smaller industry potential competitors to have a say about dicamba, for example. Now, I get it. There are people on two sides of this issue. There are people who don't like dicamba. There are people who think dicamba's great. There are people who don't like how volatile it is and the drift that potentially occurs. There are people who just want you to leave them alone, let them grow their crops and use whatever they want to use. I understand. I could tell you it's not a black and white issue. The only way it's a black and white issue to me is when Thomas Jefferson said, if it picks my pocket or breaks my leg, that's when the government gets involved. So if you're doing something to steal from me or harm me, then there's got to be recourse for that. And I would assume that means that if you're spraying a chemical on your property and that chemical goes to another property and hurts their crops, that's a pretty black and white, straightforward case to me. However, let's keep going with this because I'm going to give you the perspective here if you don't know it. Piazza said he was inclined to stay his ruling while the case is appealed to the Arkansas Supreme Court because the plant board has other responsibilities beyond devising and enforcing pesticide and herbicide use. The Attorney General's office, which represents the plant board in the case, said late Thursday that it was in the process of determining our next steps. Governor Asa Hutchinson's office said, we will continue monitoring the case and will review the order once it is issued. Now, this is rich to me because Monsanto is suing and has sued the state because of the way the plant board is selected. The governor gets some appointments and some industry groups get appointments. The fact of the matter is the governor has tried to do exactly what this court has done a couple of times now. The governor has tried to take away and reform, if you want to use that word, the way the plant board is selected. He has tried this a couple of times. And now we have this lawsuit saying, essentially there needs to be maybe some legislation. That's going to be the idea generated from all of this anyway. Attorneys for Monsanto, now owned by Bayer, argued that the Arkansas law setting up a 102-year-old board was an unconstitutional delegation of powers because 9 of the board's 16 voting members are selected by agricultural groups such as those representing seed dealers, seed growers, pesticide manufacturers, and the horticulture industry, foresters, and aerial applicators. Monsanto argued that members appointed by the private interest groups aren't accountable to Arkansas citizens, legislators, or the governor. Now that Monsanto is extremely hypocritical here. That Monsanto's attorneys are arguing that it's not fair how the board is made up because they're groups representing seed dealers, seed growers, pests. Just who do you think Monsanto is? Is Monsanto not a special interest? Let me just tell you right now, okay? If I had to pick between special interests, ones that were looking out for the way agriculture is done in Arkansas, I'm going to trust the farmers in Arkansas before I'm going to trust Monsanto. Period. And again, I know it's not a black and white issue sometimes. I know there are things the plant board has done regulatory-wise that I would say probably don't make sense. But I'm just telling you, it's a whole lot better than letting a corporation, which this is, the connections between the governor and Monsanto, they are what they are. I have often speculated the reason Asa wanted to undo the way the plant board was selected, giving politicians and himself more power over it, is because that's what Monsanto wanted. Because of this chemical dicamba, for whatever reason. So Monsanto argued that members appointed by the private interest groups aren't accountable to Arkansas citizens. Well, I mean, what can Arkansas citizens do against a giant corporation like Monsanto that can just make buddy-buddy with politicians? Honest question. 7 other members are appointed by the governor to represent cotton, soybean, and rice farmers and other interest groups. 2 members represent the U of A Agricultural Division but don't have voting privileges. Quote, there's a problem with this statute, Piazza said, adding he thought it could be resolved with a new law that gives the governor appointment power via a list of nominees supplied by trade groups. This is essentially a court ruling now telling Asa to do what he's already wanted and tried to do to the plant board 2 times now. Thursday's ruling was Piazza's second in the case, blah, 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 blah. Now, that is fascinating to me. So, we will see what happens with this situation, but I wanted to give you that context there. It is extremely interesting that we have a court giving a ruling that is very favorable to what the governors wanted to do policy-wise for a long time anyway, rearranging the politics behind the Arkansas State Plant Board. And I will tell you just what people will tell you, privately. Farmers tell me privately. The governor has not liked, since he's been in office, he's not liked the independence that the plant board has from his control. Because there have been examples, and I think the dicamba thing is one of them, but I think there's other examples of some of these members on the plant board understanding that they don't necessarily have to toe the line that the governor tells them to, because they don't depend on him to appoint them. There have been back channels where the governor has tried to get people he has no power to appoint thrown off. So he doesn't, because he only has a power to appoint of 7, but there's these others, and he has actually used political pressure, according to sources, to try to get people removed here and there when he doesn't have that authority. And that's why the legislation was there, and that's why, listen, Monsanto is, first of all, Monsanto's in a lot of trouble with this Roundup situation. Hang on. Monsanto's in a lot. I want to cover this real quick. Joe, I know we got to go to break, but Monsanto got sued for all that money for Roundup and that glyphosate causing cancer. And so it sent me on like a fact-finding mission. First of all, the lawyer that won the lawsuit, $200 million, was it $80 million? The lawyer who won the lawsuit against Monsanto for Roundup causing cancer has now been arrested and charged with attempted extortion because Monsanto claims that the attorney called Monsanto first and said, if you don't give me $200 million, then I'm going to go and find plaintiffs to sue you and I'll win. So now that and they said no, is what their side of the story is. And now that they said no, then he won the case. Now they're coming back and they're arresting the attorney that won. Okay. Go ahead and start the music. Sorry. So then I look at, what did Monsanto actually argue here? Well, for years, Monsanto argues that they didn't have to disclose some of the ingredients in their Roundup because it was proprietary. And so I've been like, okay, yeah, I can understand that. It's their property. They don't want to disclose it. Well, why don't they want to disclose it? Because I think if you were to just disclose what some of these formulas were, you could go and do a simple Google search on a lot of this stuff, and you're going to find that it's carcinogenic. And I will tell you this, the fact that Monsanto can no longer hide behind its proprietary, it's going to eventually affect your household cleaning supplies as well. I'm telling you, it's also going to affect your foods as well eventually, because I've been following this for a while now. My wife really follows this a whole lot. I found this other article. This is from 2016. Why companies don't show the ingredients in their cleaning products. They also, claim that it's proprietary. All right? And this is what's fascinating. And let me see here. Yeah. The reason for the secrecy around cleaning product ingredients, again, we're not talking about pesticides anymore. The reason for the secrecy around cleaning products ingredients is competition. Companies that argue against disclosure do so on the basis that it's proprietary information and their success hinges on it. Just because the ingredients aren't listed doesn't mean products are bad or unsafe, but it is curious there is little regulation. So they compare this to also what goes on in Europe. Other countries model some alternative options for regulation. In Europe, they reverse the burden of proof. Manufacturers have to show that chemicals are safe before they introduce them. In the U.S., chemicals are innocent until proven guilty, referring to the lack of testing data required. Now, there are regulatory agencies that test these products, but then they don't release the studies, okay? So, for example, when you see on a cleaning product fragrance, well, what is that? What is fragrance? Well, much like Monsanto and Roundup, fragrance is proprietary. You don't know what is in that word fragrance. But if you were to know, you could Google that chemical, and what many people are starting to wonder is that's carcinogenic. And so I think what's happened with Monsanto and Bayer is going to eventually trickle into a lot of these places. And, you know, I'm not some pro-Europe guy, but I will tell you this. It's interesting to me. I was sitting down, had dinner with a friend a couple of months ago, and he's got this dairy allergy, and he was telling me that he can't eat dairy, but if he goes to Europe, he can have all the dairy he wants. And I was like, really? He was like, yeah. I was like, explain that one. He was like, well, I think it's just a lot of these unknown disclosed preservatives and chemicals that are everywhere in America, but they're not in other places. Very, very strange. Anyway, tell me what you think about this. We'll be back in just a moment.
Folks, as a taxpayer or business owner, I know the government rarely gives the people a break. Big government politicians seem to always want more money from us, taxpayers. So if you want to support the work we're doing right here at Conduit News, bringing you the truth, then why not consider giving less money to the government that never stops overspending and overtaxing us by giving a tax-deductible donation to Conduit for Commerce, the premier organization in Arkansas that never stops promoting small business and limited government. Just go to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Support Our Cause. From there, you can decide if you want to donate monthly or one time. Give the government that's using your tax dollars to grow and grow less, and give the people fighting for your values more. Conduitforcommerce.org.
As we speak, Beijing is employing a whole-of-government approach, using political, economic, and military tools as well as propaganda to advance its influence and benefit its interests in the United States.
And I wanted to welcome back to Arkansas Chairman Chu. Please give Chairman Chu a round of applause.
China is also applying this power in more proactive ways than ever before to exert influence and interfere in the domestic policy and politics of this country.
Chairman Chu, I got to know as he is the CEO and chairman of Shandong Rui Technology Group out of Shandong Province.
Over the past 17 years, China's GDP has grown 9-fold. It's become the second largest economy in the world. Much of this success was driven by American investment in China. And the Chinese Communist Party has also used an arsenal of policies inconsistent with free and fair trade, including tariffs, quotas,
so
currency manipulation.
All right, the last segment we just did has touched the nerve of a lot of people, especially in our listening audience here. Well, first of all, some people making jokes that if you wash your dishes in Agent Orange, they'll be sparkling clean. But you know, I was telling that story of somebody that was like, you know, can't have any dairy. I'm allergic to dairy, but over in Europe I can have dairy. Jackie says that's because processing of dairy products in Europe doesn't strip out the good bacteria needed for your gut to work properly. Okay, didn't know that. Also, Lane texts in and he says that he's got a friend who just got back from Italy where he can eat all the pasta he wants over there, no problem, but he cannot eat pasta here in the United States. That's weird, isn't it? Isn't that strange? So, I mean, I tell you one story about that, and you're like, eh. But then you have another person that says, got a friend, same exact thing. You know, except this time, what is that? Is that where the gluten allergy that you hear about coming from? Is it from our food supply? It's just an honest question. So, yeah, anyway, I mean, these, pretty fascinating stuff. Again, my main point here is just to kind of think forward a little bit. If Monsanto was hiding behind Roundup saying that the ingredients were proprietary, and now that has been stripped out, how long before cleaning products and food, fragrance or flavor Z or flavor whatever, how long until you can't claim that fragrance on the back of your cleaning supply is a proprietary formula maybe we need to start understanding what is actually in the products we're consuming on a daily basis.
Folks, as a taxpayer or business owner, I know the government rarely gives the people a break. Big government politicians seem to always want more money from us, taxpayers. So if you want to support the work we're doing right here at Conduit News, bringing you the truth, then why not consider giving less money to the government that never stops overspending and overtaxing us by giving a tax-deductible donation to Conduit for Commerce, the premier organization in Arkansas that never stops promoting small business and limited government. Just go to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Support Our Cause. From there, you can decide if you want to donate monthly or one time. Give the government that's using your tax dollars to grow and grow less, and give the people fighting for your values more. Conduitforcommerce.org.
Transfer, intellectual property theft, and industrial subsidies that are handed out like candy to foreign investment.
We've been to Shandong province a number of times since I've been governor. We've called on people, and Chairman Chu gave us the opportunity to meet with him at Rui at their technology group there in Shandong.
Our safety system health check scans your vehicle's electronic safety systems prior to and after repairs to verify all are working properly and repaired to manufacturer's specifications. With most safety sensors mounted on the outside of your vehicle, even a minor fender bender can cause major safety issues. With your most precious
base at the expense of its competitors, especially the United States of America.
And I wanted to recognize Chairman Lee to my right, who is the founder of Sun Paper of Shandong province in China. I also want to recognize Secretary Ma of Shandong province.
As President Trump said just this week, in his words, we rebuilt China over the last 25 years.
Last November, as you know, I traveled to Shandong province. I met with Chairman Lee. I toured Sun Paper Company along with Mike Preston. While in China, we signed a letter of intent on behalf of the state of Arkansas with Sun Paper, indicating that Sun Paper wanted to put a major bioproducts mill in South Arkansas,
The Communist Party has set its sights on controlling 90% of the world's most advanced industries, including robotics, biotechnology, and artificial intelligence. To win the commanding heights of the 21st century economy, Beijing has directed its bureaucrats and businesses to obtain American intellectual property, the foundation of our economic leadership, by any means necessary.
Chairman Lee and I met yesterday. Chairman Lee indicated to me that Sun Paper has selected Arkadelphia in Clark County as the location of a $1 billion bioproducts mill.
Beijing now requires many American businesses to hand over their trade secrets as the cost of doing business in China. It also coordinates and sponsors the acquisition of American firms to gain ownership of their creations. Worst of all, Chinese security agencies have masterminded the wholesale theft of American technology, including cutting-edge military blueprints. And using that stolen technology, the Chinese Communist Party is turning plowshares into swords on a massive scale.
Well, thank you all for joining us via Skype from Beijing this morning. Here in Beijing, it is 10 p.m. in the evening. I've had a very successful trip to China.
China now spends as much on its military as the rest of Asia combined. And Beijing has prioritized capabilities to erode America's military advantages on land, at sea, in the air, and in space.
I've spoken at Tsinghua University here in Beijing, which was a treat for me to speak with young Chinese students about Arkansas, and also to talk about the relationship between China and the United States.
China wants nothing less than to push the United States of America from the Western Pacific and attempt to prevent us from coming to the aid of our allies. But they will fail. Beijing is also using its power like never before. Chinese ships routinely patrol around the Senkaku Islands, which are administered by Japan. And while China's leaders stood in the Rose Garden at the White House in 2015 and said that his country had, and I quote, no intention to militarize the South China Sea. Today, Beijing has deployed advanced anti-ship and anti-air missiles atop an archipelago of military bases constructed on artificial islands.
All right.
China's aggression was on display this week.
To everybody out there. Thank you so much for being with us. We are awaiting Congressman Bruce Westerman. He just texted me. He's a little delayed, so we're going to be talking with Congressman Bruce Westerman coming up here at 7:45, okay? So just bear with us. Headline, lawmakers in Virginia. We've had a listener that has called this program wanting us to talk about this for about a week now. Lawmakers in Virginia are willing to use military to enforce gun control. This Newsmax.com. This was back on the 18th. Wading through current affairs or any news nowadays is difficult. Our television, newspapers, and social media is saturated with sensationalized big stories, while many other stories are underreported or never make the news at all. Thereby, important issues and points remain hidden until it's too late for anyone to do anything. This way, even if an uproar is started, the pushback is minimal. It's a tactic that politicians use at all levels. Such is the case in Virginia right now. Boy, we could use a Richard Henry Lee about right now. After November's Virginia legislature elections that led to Democrats taking control of both chambers, the gun control legislation proposed by some Democrats moved forward, proposing a much stricter regulation. Now the push to pass gun laws may not alarm anyone because it's such a common theme in Democratic-controlled state governments, but this time it's different. Every news network in the country seems to be solely focused on the impeachment hearings, and for good reason. It's a big deal. However, the coverage of Trump and these hearings are providing ample concealment for lawmakers to push through potentially unpopular decisions. And unpopular they are. Legal firearm owners in the state already joined with their sheriffs to form Second Amendment sanctuary counties, which declare the authorities in these municipalities uphold the Second Amendment in the face of the proposed gun control measures. The police force in the state is put into the crossfire in this situation. Enforcing these unpopular measures of gun seizures is not only against the current law, but it's also downright dangerous. Law enforcement officers listening to this broadcast right now, I don't want you to think what's happening in Virginia could never happen in Arkansas, but that aside, I would encourage you, if you haven't thought about what you would do if you were given a blatantly unconstitutional order, please do. Please prepare yourself. I would love, in a perfect world, I would love for all of the law enforcement officers that police this great state to ask themselves personally, where is your line? And if you were asked to confiscate weapons, would you do it or would you leave? Would you walk away? Would you protect your citizens' rights? What would you do if you were asked to take away someone's rights, their God-given rights? I hope it never comes to that, but I would hope that you would ask yourself that question, because there is if you ever get to that point, there's a lot at stake. The police force in the state is put into the crossfire in this situation. Enforcing these unpopular measures of gun seizures is not only against the current law, but it's also downright dangerous. But Democratic lawmakers in Virginia advise that the law is the law. If the people did not adhere to upholding this law, they would call in the National Guard to enforce it. So that everyone understands, enforcing gun laws means prosecution along with seizure of weapons. Let me reiterate, he says, so everyone knows what was just said. These lawmakers who work for us, U.S. citizens, are threatening to use the military against citizens to enforce gun confiscation and seize our private property. If allowed, this would set a dangerous precedent across the country. This action is precisely why the Second Amendment was created. It's to protect ourselves from a tyrannical government. The Second Amendment exists to give us the right to fight back. That little skirmish out there in Utah over that land deal, was it the Bundy Ranch with the Bureau of Land Management? You want to know why the Bureau of Land Management stood down, don't you? It's because, right or wrong. I'm not telling you who was right or wrong in that case. But you know why the Bureau of Land Management stood down, don't you? It's because the free people had guns. And the law enforcement knew that if they opened fire, there were going to be bullets flying back in their direction. A lot of them. And so it was a deterrent, wasn't it? Because if they didn't have guns, the government would have come and taken all that land. That was a modern-day reminder of how valuable the Second Amendment is. I don't care, where you come down and whether, Bundy should have given the land up or, his cows or whatever. I can't even remember all the specifics at this point. Just something to think about. The hypocrisy is the law argument is that if there is a law that the Democrat-controlled government wants to be enforced, they're willing to call on the military to do so. If the law in question is not something that serves their agenda, such as with immigration and ICE detainees, they are ready to ignore those laws. Yeah, that's true. The difference is illegal immigration is a law on the books. We're talking about the Second Amendment. We're talking about breaking laws, right? Anyway, what's going on in Virginia is certainly something we shouldn't ignore as a country, certainly something we should ignore as a state, and we should, it really should strengthen our resolve. Just like Virginia, by the way, just like Virginia says you can murder a baby after it's born, and then Arkansas comes and says, you know what, we're going to set up a Roe versus Wade trigger law. So if the Supreme Court ever overturns Roe versus Wade, then we have a law that triggers into effect our anti-abortion laws go into effect day one in Arkansas. That passed. So we did the opposite. They are trying to kill more babies. We're trying to save more babies. And I think that's something to be proud of here as Arkansans. We should be proud of our politicians for doing that, for representing our will. Likewise, if Virginia's going to try to do this, I think we should strengthen our Second Amendment rights even more. We should end gun-free zones. We should have a bill that ends gun-free zones in this state. So, just my 2 cents. William Barr sat down and interviewed with Martha McCallum recently. Says that Comey is lying over his attempt to distance himself from the FBI. Comey told Fox News Sunday that as the director of the FBI, he was 7 layers above the investigation and that he left things to the career professionals when 17 serious errors occurred. Au contraire. William Barr, quote, the idea that this was 7 layers below him, Jim Comey, is simply not true. I think that's one of the problems with what happened was precisely that they pulled the investigation up to the executive floors, and it was run and bird-dogged by a very small group of very high-level officials. We are headed towards a collision, my friends. We are headed towards a collision. John Durham, headline, Zero Hedge. John Durham reportedly seeking ex-CIA Director John Brennan's emails, call logs over the Russian probe. Attorney General William Barr told the story with Martha McCallum that by the time Trump was inaugurated in January 2017, it had become clear that allegations raised by the FBI against a former Trump campaign aide, George Papadopoulos, were largely baseless, and that pursuing George Papadopoulos had very little probative value. John Durham isn't just looking at the FBI, he's looking at other agencies, departments, and private actors. The other agents is cooperating very well. Additionally, Barr admitted in the interview in a very candid, moment that federal prosecutor John Durham, who is scrutinizing the Russia investigation, quote, isn't just looking at the FBI, he's looking at other agencies, departments, and private actors, but that the other agencies are cooperating, which is all the more intriguing as, at the same time as his interview aired, the New York Times dropped a bombshell reporting that, according to 3 people briefed on the inquiry, Durham's investigation has begun examining the role of former CIA Director John Brennan and how the intelligence community assessed Russia's 2016 election interference. Specifically, Durham has requested Brennan's emails, call logs, and other documents from the CIA, and judging by Barr's statement that other agencies are cooperating very well, we suspect Durham will get what he wants. Additionally, the New York Times reports that Durham is also examining whether Mr. Brennan privately contradicted his public comments, including May 2017 testimony to Congress, about both the dossier and about any debate among the intelligence agencies over their conclusions on Russia interference. Of course, the New York Times is quick to warn readers that Durham's decision to probe Brennan's actions deeper will add to accusations that Mr. Trump is using the Justice Department to go after his perceived enemies. But we ask, just as with Ukraine and the Bidens, is it only not allowed to root out corruption if the corrupt is a representative of the other? We will let A.G. Barr respond to that implied problem. Quote, the president bore the burden of probably one of the greatest conspiracy theories, baseless conspiracy theories in American political history. That is nuts. Again, there is a collision about to happen, folks. And, yeah, they're going to say, we're a banana republic now. Trump's going after his political enemies. Well, that's what they're saying right now. That's what they said about Joe Biden. They should have just left Trump alone. That's what they should have done. They should have left the man alone. But instead, they just, as Lindsey Graham said, you guys want power so bad, I hope you never get it. This will be like Kavanaugh all over again. This impeachment charade is going to be like the Kavanaugh thing all over again, in my opinion. You mark my words on that. Speaking of impeachment, let's check in with Congressman Bruce Westerman. We've got Congressman Bruce Westerman back on the line with us. Congressman Westerman, thanks so much for calling in, sir. We appreciate it.
Hey, good to be with you, Paul. Good to be back in Arkansas. I got on the late flight out of D.C. last night. I'm back in the natural state.
I'm glad that you are. I really am. Can you please walk us through this week and having to sit through the impeachment and listening to all those Democrats?
It was unreal. Just the things that were said, and when you really back off and look at this whole process, I actually know a guy that's a psychiatrist, and I asked him, I said, what is it called when you do something and you turn around and point your finger at somebody else and say they did it? He said there's actually a psychological disorder called projection, psychological projection, I think is what he called it. And it's almost, maybe it's a side symptom of Trump derangement syndrome. But in so many things, the Democrats do something and then turn around and say, look, the Republicans did it. And I started observing their actions from that perspective. And if you think about, even the first thing they came after the president on Russian collusion, and you look at what they did with the Steele dossier and Fusion GPS and misusing the FBI and the FISA courts, horrible things that they did, and then they turn around and point at the president and say, you interfered in the elections. You had the Russians interfered in the election. And then this after the Mueller report, and they didn't get where they wanted to get with that, just almost immediately it's you're going for quid pro quo against the Ukrainians. We're going to withhold U.S. aid to try to get what you wanted from them. Right on top of a video of Joe Biden openly talking about how he went to Ukraine, not to even some other country, but to Ukraine, and said, if you don't do this, if you don't fire this prosecutor, you're not going to get the money, bragging about it. And even yesterday, we had this vote on, they're trying to change the tax law that we passed. And, you know, the Democrat motto is Republicans give tax breaks to the wealthy, and we're for the middle income, blah, 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 which the Tax Cut and Jobs Act did more to benefit lower income and middle income than anything I've ever seen a Democrat do. And they passed this bill yesterday to give a tax break on state and local tax deductions that affects about 1% of the wealthiest people in our country. It just, and they were in their debate talking about how they were helping the poor and the middle class, and what they did had absolutely zero, nada, nothing to do with low-income people. And I guess if you've got the media on your side, you can get away with stuff like that.
Yeah, they're helping. What are they helping? Rich liberals in blue states. That's what they're. That's
yeah,
what they're
it's
helping.
for it. So it allows you to deduct more than $10,000 in interest on your mortgage every year. Is what the law that they had in place there. And we capped that in the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, and you know it affects very few people in Arkansas. But I mean, you've got to. It's complicated in the math, but I can tell you it's for the what they did was for extremely rich people.
Yeah, exactly.
But they used the argument they were helping low-income people.
Yes.
And you're just sitting there, and our guys we were calling it out. Saying, you're wrong. Here's the data. Here's the facts. And I'm sure they'll be lauded as fighting for the low income.
So you're exactly right, and you know the projection is real. They do project the very thing they're guilty on their opponents, and you laid it out really nice there, Congressman Westerman. Now we have the Speaker threatening, I guess, to not send the articles of impeachment to the Senate, and the House managers to actually give the Senate, you know, to start the Senate process. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, what is she trying to leverage?
It's projection again. She's saying the Senate won't have a fair trial, and you're like, did that just come out of her mouth? Like, how can she even remotely say something like that after the circus that she orchestrated in the House to say she's concerned about a fair process in the Senate? It absolutely. I guess they're getting what they want, because stuff like that drives me crazy.
Yeah, that's true. It drives everybody crazy. Well, I mean, you know, I heard Mitch McConnell. Well, let me ask you this: why do they have to wait on her to send the articles of impeachment to the Senate? I mean, the vote's taking place. It's up at, you know, House.gov or whatever. I mean, you can see it right there. I mean, why can't Mitch McConnell just exercise his authority and dismiss this whole thing?
Well, and I think it's an area where the Constitution doesn't specifically say they have to transmit, but the way the House and the Senate works is when we pass a bill, we transmit that bill to the Senate, and we can hold bills in the House. So I think that's the process that they're using. The Senate, and that's all in rules. The Senate makes their rules. I guess the Senate could go in with a simple majority vote and change a rule and say that if we don't get a impeachment papers within 2 days after they pass the House, we refuse to hear them. I mean, you could start playing that game, but all of this stuff they've been through, and now they're saying, you know, we're just not going to send the impeachment documents over to the Senate. And I think there's procedurally they can probably do that, but who would have ever imagined that was their plan? And to say we're not going to send it because the process won't be fair in the Senate.
Yeah. Congressman Bruce Westerman.
And this idea of calling witnesses. The Senate has no more power to call witnesses than the House did. They put together a hurried up sham document, and they were, they didn't want to go through the process to force witnesses to come, but they're saying the Senate now has to force those witnesses to come that they couldn't make come.
Yeah.
It's just, nothing surprises me that comes out of Nancy Pelosi's mouth or any of her colleagues anymore.
Congressman Bruce Westerman, we're out of time, sir. Merry Christmas to you. Thank you so much for giving us your take on this, and keep strong. Be encouraged. The people of Arkansas have got your back, and we appreciate you representing us.
Thanks, Paul. You have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
All righty.
God
yes,
bless.
Sir. Folks, got to take a break. Back in just a moment to wrap up the show. Don't have a lot of time.
Folks, as a taxpayer or business owner, I know the government rarely gives the people a break. Big government politicians seem to always want more money from us, taxpayers. So if you want to support the work we're doing right here at Conduit News, bringing you the truth, then why not consider giving less money to the government that never stops overspending and overtaxing us by giving a tax-deductible donation to Conduit for Commerce, the premier organization in Arkansas that never stops promoting small business and limited government. Just go to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Support Our Cause. From there, you can decide if you want to donate monthly or one time. Give the government that's using your tax dollars to grow and grow less, and give the people fighting for your values more. Conduitforcommerce.org.
When a Chinese naval vessel came within 45 yards of the USS Decatur as it conducted freedom of navigation operations in the South China Sea, forcing our ship to quickly maneuver to avoid collision. Despite such reckless harassment, the United States Navy will continue to fly, sail, and operate wherever international law allows and our national interests demand. We will not be intimidated, and we will not stand down.
And we'll be calling on multiple prospects in China, as well as continuing our relationship with Sun Paper in Shandong Province.
In recent years, China has taken a sharp U-turn toward control and oppression of its own people. Today, China has built an unparalleled surveillance state, and it's growing more expansive and intrusive, often with the help
folks,
of
we
U.S.
only
technology.
have a few seconds
and when it comes
left,
to religious
but
freedom,
I did want to give you your meme of the day before we go. Again, special thanks to Congressman Bruce Western for coming on. Here's your meme of the day. It's kind of fitting considering all of this impeachment nonsense that's going on. Yep, there it is. Joe's got it. Yeah, throw it up there. It's pretty funny, courtesy of M.A.G.A on Instagram, Megaphone on Instagram, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. So am I president now? Or what? What's going on? Folks, we'll see you on Monday. Get that Christmas shopping done if you haven't already. Merry Christmas to you. Be safe, Arkansas.